I'd like to bring the meeting of August 19th to order. First, ask if anybody besides LCAT is recording this meeting.
Shirley Tancredi for the minutes.
Okay. I'd like to review and approve the minutes of the meeting of August 5th, 2014.
So moved.
And second?
Any further discussion?
I'm good.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Awesome.
Okay. And at this point, we'll turn it over to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. My first item I'm going to defer to Mr. Collins to speak to, which is providing the board with an update on Elm Street and Maple Shade, particularly since the DPW forces are now getting involved in this part of the project. So John will pick that up in a couple of minutes. Primarily what I wanted to do tonight was to update the board on a couple of things that have been going over the past, really over last week. Last week was a pretty busy week. As you may have seen and heard, we had received word on Monday, late in the day on Monday, much to our surprise, that National Grid was bringing in a new control house structure to their substation, which is located behind our property on Callender Drive. They apparently had gone through the permitting process, but they thought they were driving on state highways. They didn't realize that the state highways were under the town control. So they actually had provided no notice to the town in advance. Once we got wind of that, we got together with the police department and National Grid on Tuesday and got everybody on the same page, and ultimately their control house was brought in on Wednesday. They delayed it for a day to make certain everything was in order, and came in without any incident. The truck measured 93 feet long by 16 feet wide, and what they did was they came northbound on Route 5 through Long Meadow up to Route 83 in Springfield, and they came back down 83, back down North Main Street to the Rotary. And what they then did was they came about 3/4 of the way around the Rotary. We shut the Rotary traffic down temporarily, and they backed to the control house all the way up Pleasant Street, because there was no way to turn that truck around once they got into Pleasant Street. So shut everything down. DPW helped out, police department helped out, and it all went without incident. We had to remove one stop sign right at the intersection of Callender Ave, but that was it. There was no other damage, no other problems getting the truck around the Rotary.
Wow.
Sounds great. Better him than me, right?
That's right. That's right. I watched it. It was unbelievable.
Did you?
Yeah.
The next item I wanted to update the board on and give you a chance to answer any questions if you had anything was relative to the water supply emergency that we dealt with last week. The timing on that was we received a call. It was 5:33 on Thursday from Springfield Water and Sewer indicating that they had had a failure of a valve on their 60-inch pipeline at Proven Mountain. There are 3 pipelines that leave Proven Mountain. One of them was already out of service for a 2-year-long replacement project. The valve failed on the largest line that they have leaving Proven Mountain, so it left a single 42-inch line to serve Springfield and all the communities served by the city of Springfield. What that meant was we immediately saw a drop in pressure of about 20 psi early that evening. And there was a real concern that we in Springfield had regarding what would happen the next morning once sprinklers and everything came on and we really see our typical peak demand period. And as a result of that, they declared a water supply emergency with the goal of really cutting back all non-essential water usage. It seemed to have been pretty effective. Their goal was to try to get consumption down to typical wintertime type levels. And if we could get to typical wintertime levels, we could get through this without a problem, without anyone seeing pressure drops that were creating problems. Once we got that notification, we dispatched our staff. We immediately shut down all the town irrigation systems. We had everything shut down by 9 o'clock that night. Felt it was very important for us to be able to set the example, so that we didn't have any residents that were waking up the next morning with a water supply ban, finding out that the town was irrigating their fields when they were being asked not to irrigate. So we shut everything down as quickly as we could. We put a protocol in place where we were manually watching our pump station operation and turning our pumps on during non-peak periods, and we kept that going through the weekend, and we got through it without any problems. We minimized the impact on the adjoining communities by doing so. And then late in the day on Sunday, as you all heard, the water supply emergency was lifted by the city. We also did put a protocol in place with the fire department recognizing that the areas in the town that are served directly from the city of Springfield could, during a fire flow event, see some very low pressures. We were ready to turn on our pumping stations manually if necessary to supplement the available pressures during those fire flow events. So we had a whole...
Can you do that if you don't have volume? Or-
We can. During a fire flow event, what it might do is it might drop pressures upstream of the pumping station in Springfield, but at that point, what's most important is getting adequate flow and adequate pressure to the fire event, and letting some of the other issues develop if necessary. Fortunately, we didn't have to go to that, go to those provisions, but we were ready to do that really on a moment's notice if necessary. And as I said, it worked. All the residents cut back significantly on their water usage. The potential problems that we in the city expected could occur did not occur, and we all got through it very well. It did give us an opportunity. I reached out that night, Thursday, when we were notified to Connecticut Water Company, now that they have extended a pipeline to the town line to serve the Crescent Lake area. It actually gives them the ability to supply water to the town if necessary. Their incoming pressure is actually higher than our incoming pressure. They would have no problem getting the water to us. We didn't end up implementing anything, but we did talk about what might be necessary for them to serve us. And what would be necessary is that we would have to install a couple, probably 2 additional fire hydrants on their line, so that we could bypass. They have a pressure reducing valve that's on their main line to reduce their pressure before it gets to Crescent Lake. We would have to go around that to get water directly to us at an adequate pressure, which we could. Again, we kind of conceptually talked about what might it take during an emergency condition. We talked, about maybe putting some of those measures in place in the future if necessary, if we ever end up in this situation.
Plus a meter?
Plus a meter, yeah. And we still have the question as to whether or not the meter that's in there could read backwards or not, but it was really Thursday night we're saying, if the worst case scenario happens, what do we do? And they and we would have been ready to jump up on things if necessary.
So maybe we should explore that.
That's
a little
definitely
further.
Yeah, definitely part of the plan. We are also talking with them about the agreement, which really never, between us and Connecticut Water Company, that never really envisioned a shutdown of the line. So how to modify and update that agreement so it serves us going forward.
Right.
Plus it could go the reverse way too. If they had a failure at their end, we could again continue to supply them water if
Correct.
they had a problem.
And generally, it's good practice, as many potential sources of water as you can get, the better during emergency conditions, because as we saw here, it does happen.
Well, yeah. It happened a few years ago, too.
Right.
Yeah.
This may be silly, but I'm just gonna ask it anyway. So the extra cost that we had to incur and the lost revenue that we potentially saw, is there an insuranceable or a back chargeable or a credit amount that we could apply to Springfield Municipal to recoup any costs, or is it just like mutual aid, oh well, help us when we have a problem?
It's certainly worth exploring from an insurance standpoint. I don't know if there'd be an insurance coverage that would help us out in that case. I thought about that, because not only did the town incur some cost in terms of overtime and labor associated with manning systems on a manual basis, the lost revenue.
Right.
In addition to that, all the communities served by Springfield and Springfield themselves will incur some cost of repairing this issue, and I would imagine that cost will get spread amongst the communities the same way any other capital cost gets spread amongst the communities. It's interesting to think about it. Springfield Water and Sewer Commission is not they're not a profit-making entity, so it's not as if there's a reservoir of money that can be dipped into to reimburse people. It's basically there's a cost, and everybody that benefits from the service splits those costs up.
Right.
There isn't currently within our agreement any provisions for,
Interrupted service?
well, for this, there are some provisions. There are provisions for emergency orders just like they issued, where basically if some event like this happens, they have the authority to to issue an order and require us to curtail our water usage just as they did. Beyond that, there really isn't anything that talks about back charging or recovery of costs or things like that. But so, did the town incur costs and did they lose revenue as a result of this? Yes. Certainly worth talking to our insurance company about whether there's any way to recover it, and certainly put it on the table at Springfield and see what they have to say.
And so the catastrophic would be having only a 42 left. If something happened to the 42, what's our fallback then? Connecticut and...
If something happened to the 42, our best fallback would likely be Connecticut feeding our high service area, and then we could actually back feed the low service area from the high service area by opening some of the isolation valves and basically shutting. It depended how far we wanted to serve. You know, we could actually supply back into Springfield some distance, or we could shut valves at the city line and serve just the low service area. So yeah, that would be sort of the catastrophic, fill the tanks, and that's what we tried to do over the weekend, is keep the tanks full, because that's kind of our safety measure there right way. You know, we have a couple of days worth of storage there that could be kept within the high service area or bled into the low service area to get the low service area water if necessary.
Do we connect to almost every low service? Or is like Holland Drive and a few of the isolated ones not going to get touched?
There are
Like a few, right?
There are a few. There's actually a few streets that are served directly from Springfield. There are a few streets in Springfield that we directly serve.
Right.
So it goes both ways
We
to
don't
some
connect-
extent,
we don't
but not
connect to
significant
Wilbraham?
volumes of
We
water.
don't
we could
connect to
probably-
Wilbraham? You don't connect to Wilbraham?
I
no?
don't believe so, no.
So if we lost, I'm just asking for information, if we lost for a week, for some reason, we could potentially get from Connecticut, fill our tanks, take care of 90-something% of our residents with low pressure and obviously mandatory
Right,
bans.
significant restrictions at
And
that
then
point.
possibly fire hoses from hydrant to hydrant to get some of those last stragglers if we had to, or
Possibly, yeah.
some people would potentially not have water.
Yeah, it's hard to say what if, because what's happening on the other side of the line at that point.
Can we shut off all of ours at our town lines? Do we know that?
I don't know if we have a valve. We are 4 connection points we can shut down. These few side streets that are served off of branches, you know, they're dead-end streets, for instance, that we can't serve very well, so they're served, for instance, off of Dwight Road.
Right.
I don't think we have a valve at the town line necessarily there, so there might be a handful of homes that we would have no ability to serve.
Well, we're not silvering them the water now anyways.
Correct,
Right,
correct,
so-
right.
When Springfield failed, they still have water service for Springfield.
So, not for today, but a good lesson to kind of learn, and then maybe a future thing with new engineers or staff to map out, you know, are there some things we want to do in the future? Because like the White Road, you might come off of Brayburn with a hose up and over somebody's backyard and at least
Right.
take care of some people. You know, if we could map out what our areas are. You know, and I'm only thinking, this is just a wake-up call that we lost pressure, but if that 42 went down, or if somehow the water was contaminated and they had to shut it off, you know,
Right.
what are we gonna do? So Connecticut might be a good thing for
Right,
us.
definitely.
That might have been a really good project.
In the scheme of things, you typically favor volume over quality. At the end of the day, keeping water in your pipes, even if it needs to be boiled, even if is preferred typically over having no water. So,
Right,
you know, in that situation, you know, you can declare boil water orders and things like that if necessary.
Cool.
So yes, it was a good learning exercise and good for us to really see what could happen and be ready for it if it does happen again.
Excellent.
So on top of that, we knew that Buckeye Pipeline was planning to cut the rail trail right-of-way at some point. We received notification early last week that they're hoping to get into the rail trail last week. We spoke with them, we asked them to give us a week notification so that we could get the word out in the press, we could get the word out on our website, and we could post signs of the rail trail, and they agreed to that. So, as you may have seen, sections of the rail trail have been closed this week. Work is going very well. They actually are moving ahead of schedule. We had from Industrial to Chestnut closed yesterday, and they got all the way through that section yesterday. So we were planning to have it closed for 2 days. It was only closed for 1 day. So that's been reopened, and now they're moving on to Chestnut up to Maple as part of the second segment, and that may be 2, maybe 3 days maximum. So before the week is over, the rail trail will be completely reopened. One of the items we will be doing, and we've discussed it with Buckeye already, is making certain that we walk the rail trail fully, making sure that the rail trail has been properly cleaned after the clearing efforts, because the machinery they use does throw, debris around, pieces of twigs and things like that around, and they
Oh, yeah.
do a decent job cleaning up after themselves, but then they have to get the brooms out and the leaf blowers and things like that to completely clear the pavement off. So before they leave the site, we will walk the rail trail to make certain it's been properly cleaned.
I saw they were doing from North Main Street into Springfield.
They, over the past couple of weeks, they
Yeah.
had been working on that, yes. So I believe it's gone well. I don't believe we've received any complaints over the last 2 days with the work going. Again, I think the key there was proper notification to the people that use it. We did have a couple of staff people on site early Monday morning at 6:30 Monday morning. The people that might not have seen the signs and might have been walking, we really put a couple of guys at each end of the rail trail to encourage the walkers to get off the rail trail so Buckeye could get in and do what they needed to get done.
Right.
Update on staffing situations. We have interviewed a couple more skilled worker candidates, and I think we're getting much closer to a selection of probably one in the short term and a second one in the not too distant future. We haven't made any offers at this point, but we're narrowing the pool down to a pool of people that we feel would be qualified and capable and a good fit for the department. We did meet, myself, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Fenney meet with our 2 candidates for the town engineer position last week. I think, as I indicated before, they're both strong candidates. We're really now spending some time taking a look at really the fit of the individual, what's the best fit for them and for us in terms of what the potential town engineer, what they're looking for, and what we can provide to them to make certain that there's a good match between the two. Because whoever we bring on board, we want to make certain that they stay with us for a long time. So we don't want to bring somebody on board just to find out that it wasn't really what they wanted to do and find out that we lose them after a couple of years.
Yeah, they were both very strong candidates.
One other item I've started to track this year is what our water consumption has been, primarily from a revenue standpoint. Anticipating this year being a relatively cool, relatively wet year, I wanted to try to get a sense of how our water consumption was trending compared to past years, and right now really just looking at last year as a benchmark. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised to note that through the end of July, taking a look at water used to date, we're at 96% of last year. So below last year, but not dramatically below last year. So that means the revenue that we bring in will be fairly close to what we brought in last year. We still have a good amount of the year to go, but we're gone through most of our peak consumption months. So as we get further along in the year, things tend to stabilize much more since we don't have the irrigation demand as great of an extent. And even last year was higher than, last year was by no means our lowest year. When I developed our revenue projections, I looked at what was the second lowest year over the past 8 years, and that was 3, 4, 5 years ago. Last year was kind of a middle of the road type of year, so we're kind of average right now.
Excellent.
And then lastly, I did want to note that I do plan to start providing to the board the same monthly budget information as I had done over the past 6 months. I haven't done it right now because the first month of the year really doesn't provide enough information to form any sort of conclusions or trends or anything like that. So
Right.
starting next month, we'll be providing the July data and the August data, and then I think it becomes a bit more meaningful at that point.
Correct, I agree.
And that's all I have.
Awesome.
We'll do, Bruce?
Yes, I have a couple items for the board. Birchland Park domestic hot water storage tanks are online as of this afternoon, so we are ready for school opening next week. Also, I provided the board with a annual facilities inspection budget sheet. It's just a brief snapshot of this year compared to last year. We're slightly over our our spending, but we had obviously that issue over at Birchland Park. So we're up about $7,000 compared to last year on the top portion. And also keep in mind too, for this fiscal 15, some of these items are not fully complete. The inspections are complete, but there's some minor repairs, probably just a few $100s that I will update as those bills come in. On the bottom section, you can see our capital project list for this summer and where we stand with those. Just to give the board just some kind of understanding where we are with those projects and obviously the maintenance inspections. If you guys have any questions, please let me know.
Just hit for me one time, so the first one,
We have FY14, that would be
14, right.
last summer's inspections.
Yeah.
And then the FY15 is this summer's inspections. And this is just the 2-month period during the summertime.
and that does include the hot water tanks?
Yes. on
So
the,
being 7 over, you were really 16 under.
Right.
Right,
Theoretically,
because that's a
right.
Right.
$24,000
But you can also see last year, we had a significant expenditure
The head
at
end of the
Birchland
road.
Park with the head end, which
Yep.
was an unforeseen cost. So like I said, we're in pretty good shape.
Nice.
Like I said, by doing some of this, I'm kind of keeping track of our vendors, where we're at. You can see Clark HVAC is a little high this year. They've been with me for quite a long time, so like I said, a little checks and balances, keeping track with some of our vendors. So I'll probably be changing things around maybe a little bit for next year.
Why are they up more this year?
Just a few more details, some minor issues when they did their boiler cleanings this year, some minor repairs, nothing significant, but just labor costs, it's prevailing wages.
Yeah.
All those things go up every year, so like you said, it just gives us a barometer on where we need to be and where we're at right now.
Okay.
And I think what you mentioned, Bruce, too, is that some of the service contracts are with large national firms where their pricing is tending to go up higher and higher, the responsiveness tends to get worse and worse, so you're looking now at trying to shift some smaller, more local service contracts that can provide the same capabilities.
Because Cummins Northeast in the last year has been sold to a larger company, I don't know the direct name, but their services and expenses have gone up considerably. So like you said, we're keeping an eye on things, and in the future we'll try to get some other vendors in here and go through our proper procedures and try to keep the cost down. Next item I have is capital update. High school tennis courts, fencing is complete. There was a slight change in plans as far as the striping and surfacing. They were supposed to be in this week. They've fallen behind due to weather on some other projects, so that is due to get started next week. The Department of Public Works also installed the footings for all the new Musco lighting. We're currently installing all conduit and trying to get all that wrapped up this week and graded and safe for the kids to be at that facility. Meadowbrook electrical upgrades is complete. We did a final little punch list today with the engineering firm for that facility. Just some minor legends and stuff and panels that need to be addressed, and some operation manuals, just minor paperwork, but the system's operational and working great.
Awesome.
Old fire station, 90% complete on the lower portion of the building. Upper parapet walls have been rebuilt. Place isn't in bad shape. All the capstone will be in place, or start to be in place as of tomorrow or Thursday. And contractor tells me he will be complete by Friday of this week.
Sounds good.
Is that bigger than we anticipated? It looks like they're doing an awful lot. I didn't think it was gonna be
No
that
change
bad.
orders.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
We actually discussed a couple, well, just some minor change order item. It's just some glue for the PVC roofing, so he's working on that, but it can't be over $1,000 or $1,500 for some minor things, so we'll have some money left in the kitty.
Cool.
It's gonna look good when it's done.
Yep. That's it.
Mr. Collins?
Elm Street, Plummer Paving has obviously done an excellent job
Oh,
with
yeah.
Elm Street. They're
No doubt.
scheduled to come back in the latter part of this week to clean some catch basins, a couple of water gate boxes, and address a few things on Elm Street, as well as Chestnut, I believe.
You're gonna get in there with a Vector truck? and-
Yes, that's correct. But overall, they've completed that job. There is a little more additional work that we had talked about on North Main Street. Mr. Morandi, I believe, has been in touch with Tom. We've done the granite repair there, so we're set on our end as far as that
Taking
depth
that
of
dip
North
out.
Main. And Tom is gonna schedule with Frank to go out there and do some milling around the edge, to notch it and to square that up. So that, and I would hope that that would be in the next couple of weeks. We are forming and preparing all the crosswalks, not just the intersection for the overhead lights, but as well as going down from the center to the intersection on Elm Crest and a few other streets and a few other areas there that we need to do some concrete work. We are working with Daigle Electric, who is doing the lights at the intersection. Our last meeting, I think that we had just put the conduit in, crossing all the roads prior to it being paved, which was good. They brought in the concrete pads for the pedestals, the crossing signals, which they'll have on all four corners now. We were able to use two of the existing poles and pads that are in place, which is going to save us a great deal of work. Our target is at the end of to have that formed and poured by the end of this week in time for school on Tuesday. And I think that that's very realistic. In addition to that, there's a little bit more cleanup on Parker Street. We've been a little short-staffed, so we haven't been able to go back out there and finish the looming and seeding and the paving of the driveway aprons up to the new sidewalk.
But there's not much left by there, because I drove by there, there's not much left there.
No, not much loom and seed, but there are some aprons that have to be put in
Yeah.
town. There's the better part of a week of blacktop probably there, but we're not in bad shape at this point. So once we're finished with Elm Street, and we're actually doing structure repairs out on the main roads. I believe all the catch basins that we had on all the main roads have been completed and repaired. We have some of the secondary streets that are not, as you might expect, the main roads get more salt, more traffic, more abuse, and when they start to fall apart, the repairs are more extensive. So we're in pretty good shape with that as well. There are some road repairs that we have to do around town, but I think that we're more or less on schedule. So I think that's about it. There's one more thing. When they did this project on Elm Street, we received 3,000 to 4,000 yards of gravel from Elm Street. We used some, as we talked about at the last board meeting, when we were working on the pad for the compost system. Right now, I would say we have 2,500 yards of gravel.
I was up there, I saw that.
In the past, I think annually, we were probably around $30,000 a year purchasing gravel for road jobs, sidewalk jobs, on a regular basis. I think that would probably, might even be a little low on some areas, some years when we did the Brown property, when we built the parking lots at Pinewell, places, things like that. But every year, we get into purchasing a considerable amount of gravel. And we are in very good shape due to this project on Elm Street. Very good shape.
How much more are we gonna need to use at the transfer station there?
Actually, we went a little heavy with the area that we did use. We're gonna have to skim some of that off and
Okay.
move that over to the next section.
All right.
I would guess probably maybe no more than 1,000 yards for both sections right now, as it is. That's gonna leave us a
Considerable
very good
amount,
amount of
yeah.
gravel going forward. And it's gonna save us considerable money over the next 2 or 3 years, no question about it. We're in very good shape.
Awesome.
When will we start moving that pile of fill over to the back area there?
We'll still be waiting for any sort of official word from Mass DEP. They expedited
This part of it, right?
this part at my request, basically,
Yeah.
because we had an opportunity to bring the material on site. They understood that. At this point, I think we talked about calendar year 15 through 18 or something like that, but kept it very open because we really didn't want to commit to exactly what we were going to do every year to give us some flexibility.
So in the
So
next 3 years will be.
In the next 3 years would be the game plan to basically grade the site, move the pile around. Most of that material tested out to be low enough permeability, so it could be the cover material. And then we'd have to spread largely compost and sand,
Some
or
organic.
organic material to grow
Yeah.
grass on, basically on the back side of the site and the edge of the site, and then the front of it would be kept open for storage.
So we basically got all the material we need.
I haven't done the analysis. I suspect we'll need every bit we have and maybe some. Material goes fast as you
Oh,
start
yeah.
spreading it around, but we'll put it to good use.
And moving a crosswalk in the center?
That's still very high on our list. We've gone out
Like
there and
after
we've
Labor
looked
Day,
at
maybe?
it. We haven't committed to a spot just yet. One of the issues being that to be ADA compliant, where the ski shop is,
Yeah.
the sidewalk's relatively short from the granite to the building.
Oh, yeah.
Now, as we come up to that sidewalk, it's got to be 1 inch per foot. So if we come up to that level, we're going to have to go in either direction.
What if we move it further, closer to
That's what we were looking at.
Subway? The
Yeah.
sidewalk's a
Further to
little
the south.
wider there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's what slowed us down a bit.
right.
You agree?
And quite honestly, putting most everything we could on Elm Street.
No, I
and
know
other
that,
things that were.
but maybe
We
after
haven't
Labor Day?
forgotten. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Beautiful. Any other business?
I'm good. Nice.
Let's schedule our next meeting, or
September 9th for the.
September 9th at
That's what-
5
5 o'clock.
o'clock is what we've talked about, right?
Yep.
Didn't make a motion. Do we make a motion for that? We
No,
just schedule it.
no,
All right, we're good.
schedule it for
We're good?
September 9th at
Good.
5.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.